Next up is another powerful discussion with global women in PR who will discuss the progress, gaps, and the road ahead. We will start with a short presentation of the results from the GWPR Annual Index 2025 by Susan Hardwick, co-founder and president at GWPR, an umbrella organization linking independent networking groups of senior women working in the global PR industry. After her presentation, we will have a panel discussion on the results and what they mean for women working in PR and comms today. The panel will be chaired by Alison Clark, founder of Alison Clark Consulting and the past treasurer of ECO. The panelists joining her will be Deepshikha Dharmaraj, CEO of Burson Group India, Ipshita Sen, head of the GWPR Empower program, Johna Burke, CEO and Global Managing Director at AMEC, and Sophie Simpson, Managing Director at Rudolphin Atteline for MENA. For now, over to you, Susan.
Can I ask everybody to stand up? Great. Okay, attention. That's what we seek. Thank you very much. Have a reset, and I will start on the presentation. And very good to see such a good audience, and actually a very balanced audience, which is great. The Global Women in PR Annual Index is something we started 7 years ago, because whilst there may be issues about whether there's a balance, until you can actually have some facts, it's very hard to say, well, this is the case. So our annual index has been going for 7 years, and we track the changes in the industry, and we look at the issues facing women working in our industry. The report that we have looks at a number of issues, and as I say, it's used for measurement and to enable us to put in place policies that will help drive the change. It's looking at different sectors, looking at everything from agencies to in-house and freelancers, so we can get a complete picture, because as we know, there are differences in all the sectors in which we currently operate. When we started doing the index, it was an objective to look at retaining female talent, because one of the things that became very apparent is that whilst we see a lot of women, and particularly in agencies in our industry, retaining that talent above a certain age or retaining that talent to go into senior roles is not perhaps as much as it should be. So we wanted to understand what the issues might be and how we could drive change. In the last 12 months, there have been a return to more flexible flexible work practices, which is very positive, and it's one of the key factors in helping retain female talent. The ability to work from home, the ability to look at our 24-hour schedules that we are all now involved with, that its flexibility is very key. In an industry where compressed working has its challenges, it's interesting to see it's still high on the wish list alongside flexible working. And that remains quite a key issue as a priority for those juggling working and bringing up a family. As I've said, flexibility remains a key issue and objective for women, and it's good to see that companies are once again embracing this. Why aren't there more women in the boardroom? There are a lot of women in our industry, but sadly, it remains the case that we still need to get a better balance. The good news is that there is a step that our survey shows that this is going in the right direction, but there is more that needs to be done. Last year, we saw a decline. This year, it has improved. So we are going in the right direction. But I'd love not to, in 12 months' time, to be standing here and saying, it's still not getting there. We need to move faster. There's a number of issues, perhaps, that reflect why there aren't more women in the boards. And one of the issues is about childcare and caring responsibilities, flexible working, and transparency around recruitment and promotion has come up in our surveys. It was quite interesting. A few years ago at Cannes Lions, I was chatting to one of the speakers, a Swedish lady running a very big agency, who said she had the opposite problem, that she couldn't get the men in her business to come back into the office after they had paternity leave. They were very reluctant, and she said, I really struggle, and I just was so amazed because I'm looking at issues from a female point of view. So there are countries that do offer the same balance, and we perhaps need to do more of that. We need to move faster, and progress is not as fast as we would like it to be. Ageism. I stand here as not somebody in their 30s, but it's very clear that we lose a lot of talent, and that talent is something we should hold on to. We need to encourage more women to think about staying in our industry longer. We've all been to awards events, and you see the team going up to get the awards, and there's a couple of older chaps, and there's 6 women, probably 25 to 35. We need a balance, and we need to encourage the women who are talented in our industry to take on those roles and stay. Otherwise, we're not going to shift the dial to having a better balance. Harassment. That was something we put in our survey 2 years ago as a question. We try and put a new question in each year. And we were so surprised at actually how prevalent harassment was, that it was a key issue. And so we've continued to include the question in the index. And it's not great. More needs to be done to look at how we deal with harassment, and it's for women at a reluctance to actually report it, to understand that it's a serious issue. And it's not just about sexual harassment, it's different kinds of harassment that exist. So I hope by highlighting it in the index that we can think and persuade businesses to really take it seriously, because again, it's something that discourages women perhaps from staying in our industry. Let's click. As I've said, for those that have reported the experience, the outcome was not always positive, with a third either being asked to leave or leaving, I should say, or being encouraged to leave. So we need to think about this more clearly. Career breaks. That's something that we looked at, and there are companies I know that actually work very hard to train and have the women and men who've been on career breaks and help them re-establish themselves back in the industry. But it's very few and far between. And it's not necessarily just about having children, it's also caring for elderly relatives or needing time out to perhaps have a reset. So career breaks, it's hard when you come back. You need to obviously learn and understand, particularly in the fast-changing world in which we operate now with AI and all the changes, that we need to support those people, the women, taking career breaks so that they can come up to speed and we don't lose that talent from them taking a break. As I've said, it's not surprising, but the impact that it has on career progression is not progressive or encouraging. So we need to think about that more clearly, and for businesses to perhaps think more about how you re-engage with somebody coming back into the business so they can continue to contribute, because losing that talent is a great shame. Diversity and inclusion. It's something that's been removed from a number of industries, as we know. I'm not going to talk politics, but there have been a change. That doesn't mean to say because the words diversity and inclusion are not on the script that they don't matter. They do. And we need to ensure that it's not 2/5, it's 100% that diversity and inclusion is part of the policies in place in the businesses operating in our industry, because it's very important. We've come a long way, but we've got further to go. And this year, it's the first on record showing a downward trend, which is not surprising given the geopolitical situation in which we find ourselves, that there's a downward trend in equality, diversity, and inclusion policies. There's also a downward trend in looking at diversity and inclusion targets. So it's something I'd like us all perhaps to think about more and hopefully drive some change. The index, we're going to give you a copy. We decided to print it. We believe that actually if you have a printed copy in front of you, you're probably more likely to read it than persuading you to look on your screen and trail through our notes. But I'm now going to hand over to Alison Clark and our amazing panel, and they're going to talk about some of the issues that have been raised as part of our index and see if we can look at finding solutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. We've got a few minutes for a discussion around some of the topics. I'm joined by a fabulous female panel. Thank you very much for joining me today. And we're just going to pick out one or two of the highlights of the report. And as Sue said, you'll have a copy after this discussion. When I was looking at the report, colleagues, there is progress, but my takeout was it's glacial, and I was disappointed, to be honest with you, and I know we should be pleased it's moving, but I'd love to hear your comments, whether you agree with me, what you think, and what do you think it takes to actually make something more of a leap, so we have some exciting news next year and not drip, drip, drip. Johna, let me start with you, because you might disagree with me.
What a wonderful place to start, Alison. So, I agree with you and see it slightly differently, right? Because I have the context of working on destroying a single metric for 30 years and making only incremental progress with the same industry and declines in some ways. So the fact that there is consistent progress within this industry, I think makes a difference. And I think when we're looking at it in balance and comparatively, right, of what else is going on in corporates, it is trending fairly consistently. That doesn't make it right, but progress in a forward motion is still good. We should celebrate that victory and use that to empower the movement of how we can move at a faster pace. But let's just hope that we're not looking at, that same marginal change. My heart can't take it. 30 years from now that we're seeing with AVEs and vanity metrics.
Fair enough.
And things that are terrible for your souls, but you continue to use.
I understand your views, given the progress you've made with AVEs. Fair enough. Ipshita, what do you think about this?
So change is good, of course, a positive change, thankfully, because we've seen the needle go up and down a little bit in some areas. But what I want to say is that I think doing more of the same won't work. We'll have to do things a bit different. Women need to take a little bit more responsibility, I think, in owning their careers, owning sort of, upskilling. A lot of women would look to employers to do that for you. Now when DEI budgets get cut and, many training budgets are slashed, then what do? So you have to look at yourself a little bit, and I think I just want to take 30 seconds to say that we did this at GWPR. We did think out of the box, and the mentoring program that we run, Empower, did that. So we have cross-border mentoring, which nobody else thought of doing, and today we have 50 women who have graduated from 2 cohorts. So I think just a little bit of
out of the box thinking. Of course, we should do what we're already doing, but yeah, not do more of the same.
And I would love to add to that because every market is starkly different. So from a Middle East perspective, women can't necessarily do it for themselves. So for example, in Saudi, only in 2017 did women enter the workforce. So to think out of the box, we're 100% not there yet. And we need government regulation, we need country policies to support women to get into the workplace and into leadership. So for example, Saudi said by Vision 2030, we're going to have 30% of the workforce being women in leadership positions. And in 2025, we already have 36%. So in response to your comment about it moving very slowly at a glacial pace, we're moving at lightning speed. Foundational levels, I do understand, but it's a very, very different market, and we need that support from bigger policies and governments to make it happen.
Very fair point. Deepshikha, what are your views on this and the
yes,
progress?
Alison, so I have a little bit of a different take. So I've had the advantage of going down deeper into the survey. And it's very interesting that the pace of change between in-house and consulting firms is very different. So I do take solace in the fact, and I must call out and recognize consulting firms are making a substantial change. And I think that comes from leadership taking accountability to make that change. And that's one of the things we've been talking about, that, and Ipshita talked about it, right? The role of mentoring. It's not just women leaders mentoring the younger women to come into leadership, but I think the men, allies, we need more champions of women leaders. We need more sponsors of women leaders, and we all know the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. I was very fortunate to be in a firm which encouraged women leaders, and I hope I continue to do that. And I think if each one of us take that accountability on the table, put a very specific goal, by next year, it's not going to be a glacial movement. So, I mean, I would love, at the end of this conversation, Alison, and I know we'll come to that later, we should make a pledge.
Excellent. I'm all for that. Let's move on now to flexi working. Again, maybe I'm just the cynic on the panel here, but I thought 1 day a week wasn't particularly flexible, but I appreciate it varies depending on your market. So Sophie, let's start with you and just go down the line. Flexi working, is it alive and kicking in your region?
It is indeed. And look, it's very, very important. We're always debating work-life balance. What does this mean? And one thing I feel very passionately about is balance means something different for all of us in this room. And for me, it would always be about work-life harmony and making sure that we're always proactively listening to our teams and our colleagues, making sure that we're understanding what's needed and having adaptability at the root of our culture, because that's really what's going to allow for flexibility. And I know the index had some key markers in there as to what people wanted, but again, you know, 1 day wouldn't potentially be sufficient in our market. Yeah. So making sure we lean into that.
What about the United States, Johna?
I think there's still work to be done, but I think there is a shift, especially amongst women who they want that flexibility, but they also have a need for that connection, right? With so much AI and so many of these other elements kind of alienating the human effect, where women have a very high EQ, they want to be able to have that connection so that I think we don't start to see downward trends in a lot of these other data points as we just kind of get pulled along by some of this technology. So I think the remote work, you know, that the flexible working is important, but I do think it's based on what is expected. So what are those KPIs of the work that's done makes it more relevant as far as where it's done and the timing that it's done.
Would you agree with that, Ipshita?
Absolutely. I think here again, looking at deliverables, that's the first thing. And I think as we look at the future of work and new talent coming in, people are demanding a more sort of individualistic, I think, approach to the workplace. So not one size doesn't fit all anymore. So what works for X won't work for Y. I think you were saying that as well. So look at deliverables and look at what is the best way for this person to deliver, right? And if they need flexibility, great. If they want to come to office every day, great. It does, one size doesn't have to fit everybody.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely agree, but I just think you need to have a very clear stated policy. Not every firm actually has that. So we say, yes, we give flexibility, but I think there has to be understanding of what is that flexibility. There shouldn't be any misunderstanding of on deliverables, no flexibility. But it's in terms of what time do you come in, how many days a week you come in, how many month you may want to stay at home and work. So I think there has to be a very clear policy. And if I may add, it's not just for women. I think it's equally for men in the organization to have that flexibility and then to be able to balance it with listening to the individual needs and marrying that for the best output for the organization. I think that balance is very important because it's very easy to swing one way or the other. Especially the pandemic taught us that, right? We had to swing completely one way from work from home. And then we did see that there was a very firm shift to the other side of, no, we need to come back. And it was very dictatorial. So I think now we're kind of finding that balance, and I believe that's what will help us to continue. And it should not be a problem going forward, and we should be able to balance that.
I have to say yes, policies are very important because the interpretation of what flexibility is, that I think has really spoiled the whole situation, and people being called back to office. I think that's really important.
Yeah, clarity and transparency is absolutely critical.
Yes.
Let's just move on now to career breaks. We heard from Sue that, that more and more people are taking career breaks, and it might be to have a family, it might be to care for others, and other reasons. There was clearly from the survey a distinct lack of sufficient return-to-work programs. We've heard over the last day and a half now about being agile, about the pace of change in the world outside. So if you're outside our workplace, whether you're in-house or in consultancy, for 3, 4, 5 months, a huge amount has happened in that time. Let me start with you, Deepshikha. What's your view on career breaks and what more needs to be done to support return?
Okay, this is an interesting one. So I have actually encouraged many in my leadership to take career breaks. Some of them are sitting here. And it's not necessarily just for childcare or there is sort of caregiving responsibilities, but actually to do the reset. Let's not forget, we do work in a very, very fast-paced 24/7 environment. I don't think there's anybody in this room who can sort of say, I come into office at 9, I go back at 5 and I shut my laptop. Maybe some of you in Europe, but definitely not in India. We are not allowed to do that. So I think we have to take cognizance of that point and say, okay, people do need some time off. And then when they come back, now that again depends on what's the culture that you've created in the teams around you. When you come back to the work, how does your manager embrace you and sort of put you back into that work stream? And this is where I love processes. My team knows this, and all those who work with me. Process helps. Because it's easier then to slide into the role, and you clearly know what is required of you, and the process of making sure they're getting the right skills. And we've talked about upskilling. And now, of course, there's a whole lot of skilling to be done on AI and so on. But even the traditional skills and how leadership skills, interpersonal interaction skills, the various skills that we've been speaking of. So how do you make sure they get that opportunity? So for example, at Burson, we call ourselves an academy company. And there's a reason for that. Because at every point, whether you step out or even when you're continuing in the organization, we recognize you need to keep upskilling your talent. And it's not going to happen automatically. There has to be a very conscious, concerted, planned program to be able to do that. And I think that does help when people sort of take a break and return to work.
Does that chime with you, Ipshita?
Yes, definitely. And I think what is also going to help, maybe it's not showing in the numbers just yet, is that it's not only women taking career breaks now. Men are doing it too, recognizing the need for breaks, as you said, for whatever reason. And that's hopefully going to make things a little bit easier for everybody, because it's not now just a gender thing, it's something that you need for yourself. And hopefully that works.
Johna?
I think there's an important piece to this, and that is where this data is showing that transition back is there is the emotional, and we don't have really good field data when it comes to what that means for the individual. And I think it can be something as simple as policy, what you're talking about, so there is that set expectation. But something as simple as they're scheduled to come back on this date, make that date for all of their public and their email, make that 2 weeks later, so that they're able to feel like on the company policy, they're able to catch up, as opposed to taking that time from when they should be unplugged, when they should be off managing that. And that's where I think you get that advocacy and those champions of people that will race back and cleave to the culture of the organization. It's so many times how we make them feel. And I think that's the part where once we have more data around the men taking that break from career as well, I think we'll get a more expansive data set, and it will make that field data be even more striking as far as it comes to why people come back, if they come back, and how they come back for attitudinal data.
Thanks, Sophie.
I would love to add a little bit more on about encouraging career breaks, because in the Middle East, you get 45 days for maternity leave. Some countries, maybe you will get 12 weeks. Men, 1 day, some 2 days. And especially in markets such as the UAE, you come into that market to work. Only 11% of the population is actually locals. So everyone is sort of very entrepreneurial, work-focused. So when, for example, and I will focus on women here, of course, have children, to come back after 45 days is quite a big statement, and they do. And we lose a lot of women along the way because it's such a big ask. So creating better policies as organizations that show more flexibility and aren't relying on the legal system of specific countries is so incredibly important. Otherwise, you lose people completely in this market, and you don't lose them and they turn round, in a year's time and come, you lost them back to their home country, be that India, the UK. So for us, creating flexibility and the opportunity to have career breaks is essential to keep them in the country, to give them the space to be all-rounded, to represent women going forward. So we have slightly different issues and nuances, and it's on us as organizations to try solve that, which is quite, a big opportunity.
You make some very good points, all of you, but because it's not just about the individual, it's about losing that talent to the organisation, or in your case, to the region, the country. So it's super important that people are focused on it, and organisations are. We've got just a couple of minutes left. Did anybody want to make a comment or ask a question, even? There's a gentleman in the middle here, Mr. Cartwright. I think we should let a man speak for a few minutes. No, actually, just 30 seconds, actually.
I'll do 45. So in the UK, I've been involved in setting up the first award scheme for independent practitioners. And interestingly, of the 50 that we celebrated, the average age was 48. It was a 70-30 female-male gender split. Average duration in independent practice was 10 years, and it was 10% practitioners of colour. And for me, what's really interesting is not just gender or ethnicity or age, but how they all intersect. So I wondered if you had any thoughts about the intersectional piece of all of this.
Would anyone like to comment on that?
I will. It's so important. It's so important. In our office, in the UAE, we have 17 different nationalities, over 20 languages. We are living and breathing it, and I'm telling you, it is eye-opening. It's so incredibly important. We saw, unfortunately, on the screen earlier that these numbers are decreasing. This is something we're doing incredibly well because, naturally, the demographic of the audience are so diverse, but we do make a very conscious effort about it. It is something we have to be thoughtful about and often debate. So I can't stress the importance, and also being able to understand the different values and learnings that all of these different nationalities and people bring to the table.
Okay, right. We've one more question. The lady there.
I'm Arpana. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to, it's a validation of all this discussion. The fact that I'm in this room, the fact that I won an award last night, let me correct that. The fact that I was invited to be on stage today is because, and Archana Jain isn't in the room, but it's thanks to her who kept my career relevant. I have a soon-to-be 24-year-old, and I would have been lost to the leaky motherhood pipeline of women if she wouldn't have given me the flexibility to stay relevant in the industry. So I am here because I had a woman who enabled my career. Thank you.
So that's what we need, right? Mentors and sponsors, they need to step up. I think that's exactly what we're talking about when we say we need more role models, we need more people to step up and say, you know, I'll support you in coming, whether it's coming back to work or your career progression.
Great validation for everything that's in the report. We are now fresh out of time, and as you'd expect of an all-female panel, we're finishing on time. Please take your copy of the report at lunchtime. Thank you for your time. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Alice.